Welcome to our guests here in the audience and to everyone who's joining us virtually. I'm Ann Cooper Moore, the Dean of J. Murray Atkins Library. We're pleased to welcome you to Odyssey for Democracy from Charlotte to Bosnia and Herzegovina, a panel discussion featuring UNC Charlotte's own Mirsad Hadžikadić, a professor in the Department of Software and Information Systems. Mirsad is running for the Bosniak presidential council seat in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Joining him is journalist Clark Curtis, who wrote about Mirsad's previous run for the presidency in 2018 in his book, The Odyssey for Democracy, Embracing the Vision of Hope and Change in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was recently published by Atkins Library in collaboration with UNC Press. Atkins digital publishing services support the publication of scholarly works, including online journals, ebooks, and conference proceedings. Our services promote open scholarship, open access scholarship, and innovative dissemination of scholarship and research. If you are interested in publishing your scholarship through Atkins Library, please visit the library website, library.charlotte.edu. Let me introduce the moderator for today's panel discussion. John Cox, who is joining us virtually, is an associate professor of history and global studies at UNC Charlotte. Dr. Cox has published and lectured widely on genocide, racism, resistance, and human rights. His recent publications, To Kill a People, Genocide in the 20th Century, and his co-edited collection, Denial, The Final Stage in Genocide. Cox directs the UNC Charlotte Center for Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Studies, and founded and directed a similar center in his previous position at Florida Gulf Coast University. He recently spent several weeks in Bosnia and has written articles and a book chapter about the genocide of 1992 to 1995. Welcome, John, and thank you for serving as our moderator today.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be part of this program. I wish I could be there in person. I just had knee surgery 2 days ago, and I should learn that at a certain age, you shouldn't be playing basketball or soccer, or even watching basketball or soccer, because you can get excited and start jumping up and down, which is how I injured my knee. But I'm glad I can participate in this anyway, because this is a topic that's extremely important to me. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're right now in the first few days of Ramadan, which began just a few days ago. So I'd like to say happy Ramadan, or Ramadan Mubarak, to any of our Muslim friends who are joining us. I spent the entire month of Ramadan in Sarajevo in Bosnia a few years ago, and I believe that in the Bosnian language, one would say Ramazan Mubarak. And so let me send that out to our many friends here in Charlotte. Charlotte happens to be home to one of the largest Bosniak or Bosnian Muslim populations in the United States, with approximately 5,000 folks here. I'd also just like to briefly acknowledge a couple of very important and very sad and tragic anniversaries that happened to fall on this date of the 6th of April. Exactly 30 years ago, the siege of Sarajevo began. A siege that would last for nearly 4 years, the longest siege of a major city in modern world history, and a siege that claimed more than 13,000 lives. And so at any rate today, that again began on April 6th of 1992, at the beginning of that war, which would eventually claim more than 100,000 lives of Bosnian Muslims, and would lead to the genocide of Bosnian people. Only 2 years after the siege of Sarajevo began, and in fact at about this very hour in the evening, outside of Kigali, Rwanda, the Rwandan president was assassinated, and this event triggered the Rwandan genocide, which began on April 6th of 1994 and claimed the lives of roughly 800,000 people over the next 3 months. So anyway, April happens to be a month that is full of sad anniversaries related to genocide, also in Armenia, and Cambodia, but these are two that happen to fall on this date. Okay, but over the next 55 minutes or so, we're going to talk about, we're going to remember that, and that's in the background, but we're going to talk about something substantially more uplifting, which is about a powerful and exciting political and reform movement that Mirsad Hadžikadić and others are involved in, and that Mirsad has led in recent years. And in the time that I spent in Bosnia, I spent several weeks there 3 years ago, and I could definitely see, I think, especially among the young people of Sarajevo, the excitement and enthusiasm that Mirsad's movement had created. So I'm going to briefly introduce our two panelists, and then the way that the next 55 minutes will unfold is that I will ask each of them a few questions, and then we will have time for questions from the audience. I have a couple of questions have been sent in ahead of time by people registering for the event. And we also invite folks who are participating in this via Zoom to type in any question or comment that you have into the chat box. And we'll entertain as many of them as we can during the 10 to 15 minutes that we'll have for discussion and Q&A. Okay, having said that, our first panelist is Mirsad Hadžikadić, who joined UNC Charlotte in 1987 after receiving his PhD in computer science from Southern Methodist University, where he was a Fulbright scholar. Mirsad has published 3 edited books and over 40 scientific papers in journals and conference proceedings. Dr. Hadžikadić's research activities have been primarily focused on machine learning, data mining, data science, cognitive science, health informatics, and complex adaptive systems. In 1999, Dr. Hadžikadić assumed chairmanship of the Department of Computer Science here at UNCC and served as the associate director of the School of Information Technology. He helped to shepherd the transition of the school of what had been a school within the College of Engineering into an independent College of Computing and Informatics, and served as its founding dean. Until 2018, Mirsad Hadžikadić served as the founding executive director of the Data Science Initiative at our university. He is currently professor with a joint appointment in the Software and Information Systems Department and the School of Data Science, as well as the founding director of the Complex Systems Institute here at the university. Okay, our other panelist is someone else I've been very happy to get acquainted with just in recent years, the author of an important new book about the, on the topic that we'll be discussing for the next hour. And Clark, I might say too, that you write with a very nice flair and style. And I say that as a historian who finds myself subjected to very dry, boring tomes written by historians. And so it was a pleasure to read a book that really is vivid and brings humanity to life and so on. So Clark Curtis has been in the communications business for over 40 years as a print and broadcast journalist, as well as directing communication efforts in the public and private sectors. This has included serving as the director of communications for the School of Computing and Informatics at UNC Charlotte. Since founding his own communications business and nonprofit in 2017, Clark has dedicated himself to supporting the voices of those trying to make a positive impact globally and serving as a voice for the marginalized who rarely have voices of their own. Clark jumped at the opportunity to document and share the story of Mirsad Hadžikadić, his former boss at UNCC and longtime friend, upon learning of Mirsad's decision to run for office in the 2018 Bosnian presidential elections. And then the result of this was Clark's recently published book, The Odyssey for Democracy, Embracing the Vision of Hope and Change in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Okay, so with that, I have a few questions, first for Mirsad and then for Clark. And again, we invite those of you who are participating via Zoom to type in any questions that you have. And there'll also be an opportunity for those of you who are there at the library to to raise your hand and to ask questions. Okay, so yeah, Mirsad, yeah, please take a moment to explain your background growing up in Bosnia and Herzegovina and why and how you found yourself coming to the United States and specifically to Charlotte.
Thank you, John, and thank you for the introduction and for moderating the panel. Also like to thank the Dean for the nice introduction and the Atkins Library for this opportunity. Clark for putting up with me and for his persistence, all of you for being here. And especially those who worked with me in the past, and the fact that they are here means a lot because we established that friendship that made the work even more efficient. So about Bosnia Herzegovina, I grew up in Yugoslavia, was born and grew up in Yugoslavia, became Bosnia Herzegovina, actually split into 6 countries, and then I became a citizen of Bosnia Herzegovina. Worked for an electronics company, got my master's there, served in the military, decided to further my education, came to the United States to get my PhD, Southern Methodist University, machine learning, AI, and then came to UNC Charlotte because it was the whole North Carolina reminded me of Bosnia. It was green in the mountains and the ocean close by, the up and coming university, very friendly people, looked new, looked very nice. And then since then the war happened and all that engagement with family who was trying to come here, escape, a lot of people who were coming as refugees to Bosnia had to the United States, to Charlotte, some of them actually here. And throughout the process, throughout growing up really with the university and as a person, had a chance to think about greater questions in life, not only about the immediate benefits, but also about what matters the most and how it affects everybody around you. And that working through the community, with the community, on behalf of the refugees, you get engaged with the country even more so. Enough that at some point, as a dean, I decided to leave all of that and become a student again, just to go to Harvard to think to learn policy, public policy, or political science in that matter. And so the rest is history. At some point, started thinking about if I can make a contribution back to the place that I came from, wouldn't it be too selfish if you didn't even try? And that was the result of the decision to go back. Very grateful to the university for allowing me to do that. But also, I think we created an opportunity there for students and researchers to learn about the place that was at the crossroads of cultures since its very beginning. And I would love to see a class that was field-based researchers who would be embedded within the political culture during the elections to see how democracy is actually both dying and being born at the same place because it's under attack right now throughout the world. I know this is not what you expected, but that's what you get from a politician.
Yeah, and Mirsad, you've already kind of segued a little bit into the next question I was going to raise, which was if you could comment a little bit on what motivated you to run first in 2018, and then again in the elections, which will take place in almost exactly 6 months now, and maybe something about the transition after many years in academia and teaching to then entering, the electoral political arena.
Well, everything was, when I look back at that, everything was leading to that point. Why would a nerd go to learn to get a master's in public policy? Why would I be interested in establishing or being one of those who established Bosnian and Herzegovinian American Academy of Arts and Sciences, or be interested in the community work and being the president of clubs here? Why would I worry about philosophy or economy or computer science or education in general or physics or biology, because those are the books I read on a daily basis. Unless you have something in you that says you would like to do more or cannot be defined by any one thing. And that's where I found out that I am in a way, it's, I would like to say interested in so many things. Other people said I'm superficial, so there's a systemic way of looking at things, and you look at things that are true across disciplines, and then I find myself to be in that spot. And at some point you say there are certain values that a society has to have in order to succeed. And one thing, my work through complex systems, complex adaptive systems, taught me that the surface doesn't matter. The depth of it is what matters. The fundamental principles. And then you learn that you cannot succeed. The society, the family, the person cannot succeed unless there's a system of values that holds everything together, and there's a knowledge that allows you to act on it. And then I looked back in Bosnia and I found out that there's one thing that is very dominant there, and that's an opinion that somebody should do something about the problem that they are facing. It's always somebody else. It's never I, or I am responsible, or I should do something. So I didn't want to be like that, and I said, well, perhaps if I can do something, let's try it. And I'm glad that I was educated well enough, broadly enough, and have faced the research questions of simulating, modeling societies in trouble, to know that if you can get to those 2, 3 things, fundamental things, and change them in the society, perhaps citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina would have a better life and be more successful in the future. And in the end, when everything got together, my life, the problems in Bosnia and Herzegovina, at one point in the driveway, coming back from work, listening to the song from a Bosnian song on the radio, not wanting to stop it and get into the home, I realized that it's calling me back.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Mirsad, question is a little bit, it could take several hours to answer, but
based on my previous answers.
no, actually, just based on the way I would answer this question,
that was
because
diplomatic.
this is because I teach about Yugoslavia and about Bosnia in my classes, and I would have a hard time condensing this. But I'll ask you to maybe just to briefly explain how Bosnia and Herzegovina came to having this tripartite presidential system, and related to that, which of course is related to the war of 92 to 95 and the genocide, and then the carving up of Bosnia and Herzegovina, whereby almost half of Bosnia was actually handed to to the murderers. To be frank, that's one thing that I found extremely ominous in my time in Sarajevo, is that the so-called Republika Srpska, or Serbian Republic, is just over the hillside, the very hills from which bombs and shells rained down upon the city during the long siege. But maybe if you could just say something, and also maybe answer the question of if you think that that the different ethnic groups, Croatian, Serbs, and Bosniaks, can work together for a common good, and how is it that this complicated tripartite system came into being?
You're right. It could be a long answer because it started with the Roman Empire. And it started when it split into the Roman Empire and Byzantine. And from the Roman Catholics on the left-hand side and the Eastern Orthodox on the right-hand side. And that was on the eastern border of Bosnia and Herzegovina along the river Drina. After that, the Ottoman Empire came with the Turks that brought the Ottomans, not the Turks, that brought Islam to that place. So at that point, you have Eastern Orthodox, you have Catholics, and now you have Muslims. Used to be all Bosnians or Bosniaks. Well, after then Austro-Hungarian Empire came and established an interesting thing, a special Bosnian Muslim Islamic community or organization that ruled itself. And after that, what we had was that Serbia on the east decided to expand a little bit to the west to grab a little bit of Bosnia. Croatia on the west decided to expand a little bit on the east to grab a little bit of Bosnia. They needed help to do that, so they basically had a wonderful policy. Basically, they said, if you speak what sounds like our language, and if you are of our faith, you must be one of us, Serb or a Croat. So Bosnians stopped being Bosnians. Some of them remained Bosnians, others became Serbs and then Croats. That remained until to this day. So basically, this war, remember all the previous injustices and killings, all of it really just to bring back the old goal of expanding territorially Serbia and Croatia at the expense of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unlike Ukraine, where the world got together and helped with arms and instructors, all of Yugoslavia was under the arms embargo. Yugoslav army sided with Serbs, and Bosnians had nothing. How they survived, I have no idea, but they did. Can only imagine what they could do with the arms and help. So basically, to stop the war, the United States came up with something that was called the Dayton Agreement and decided to introduce an experiment in democracy, where the Constitution became consociational. And basically, it wasn't based on the citizen, but it's based on the rights of ethnic groups. They decided that even though in the original Constitution, the term was not constitutive, but it constituent peoples, constituent ethnic groups, meaning something that is inside within Bosnia and Herzegovina, comprising it. Now they are actually being part of it. They, in Bosnian language, in Croatian, in Serbian, then translated as constitutive, meaning something that constitutes something, meaning creates it, and without it, it doesn't exist. So now we have the claims that Bosnia and Herzegovina can be and only be a country of those three ethnic groups and others, which I agree, they all should be there, live together, and everybody should have equal rights, but not to the point that anybody can block everything in order to. Now, everybody has a veto power, including the presidency. Within the presidency, each of these groups have their own representative, therefore three, a Serb, Croat, and now the remainder, the Muslims, became Bosniaks. There's another group that's called others, where Bosnians exist. That's probably the only place in the world where the people who are native there don't have the rights or their own representation. That includes the Jews, the Romas, and Bosnians, minorities, and others. They are all in other. The whole constitution is the whole parliament, the whole government is divided into three, plus some little place for others. And all decisions have to be made in such a way that for it has to vote, for it to pass two-chamber parliament, you have to pass at least more than 1/3 of every club, ethnic club within that level of government. So if you don't get the support of 2/3 of Serbs, no matter how good it is, it will not pass. 2/3 of well, at least 1/3 of Bosniaks, at least 1/3 of Croats, it's not going to pass. Plus, you have to have majority. The Senate, like the upper dome, has something that's called the vital national interest. And if there's any issue that is being considered, if they don't like it, they will say, they pull the card that says vital ethnic interest, and then it goes back to another chamber where it decides, including the constitutional court, whether it is true or not, whether it is truly a question of a matter of a vital national interest. To the point that that is being used to stop anything and everything to dissolve the country. The result of it is now we have pressures with the support of Vladimir Putin and the inactivity of the European Union. We have an attempt to dismember the country, and just we don't know if the attempt is to do it in 2 or 3 parts. We'll see. I try to make it short. So,
That was that was pretty. You got a lot in there, Mirsad. Thank you. And yeah, that's definitely been among many disturbing trends. Is the support for the separationist project or secessionist project? Maybe if you could just say another word about the efforts of the so-called Serb Republic or Republika Srpska to succeed, and a project in which they are supported directly by Putin.
According to the Dayton Agreement, Bosnia is divided into, no, it's not divided, but it's organized into 2 entities. One is called Federacija, Federation. That's where mostly Croats and Bosniaks live. And Republika Srpska, they translated Republic of Srpska. It's not a republic, but it's the name, Republika Srpska. Srpska, it means belongs to Serbs. And it's basically cleansed on everybody else. It's just there. The place of genocide, Srebrenica, remained in the Republika Srpska, which is a problem. They denied that it happened, even though the international laws, international court has decided and made a decision that, yes, in fact, there was a genocide. Republika Srpska, being Serbs, would like to, at least according to their leaders, eventually join Serbia, neighboring Serbia. The Eastern Orthodox Serbians are Eastern Orthodox. Vladimir Putin is Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, just like most people in Russia. Vladimir Putin would like to cause trouble to the West anytime he can, including in the United States. And so that's what they are doing. There is a danger. If the Russians succeeded in taking over Ukraine within 6 to 7 days, everybody's absolutely sure, from EU politicians to NATO to all the Bosnians and Herzegovinians, that Bosnia would have been next, just to open another front line. And they could do it anytime with the help of half the population, which is ready to do anything they can just to take the country apart and join the other 2 neighboring countries. What's also troublesome is that there's China that is very present in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia and Serbia with the economic deals. And if they form some sort of alliance and they are supporting Serbia, which is supporting Russia and Putin, then we have a real potential of another conflict in Europe. And what's troublesome is that even people like President Zelensky, president of Ukraine, who is a wonderful person who is fighting in any way he can, even he recently, when he was talking to the United Nations or European Union, I forget which one it is, I think United Nations Council, he basically said that what's happening in Ukraine, the atrocities in Ukraine, are the most serious since the Second World War. And I said, huh? 8,700, whatever, how many people in Srebrenica perished in 5 days? What do you mean? The worst. It's so easy to forget when it's not in the news. It doesn't make the victims of the atrocities in Ukraine any less troublesome or less worthy. It's not about that. It is just that we have to remember what people are capable of, and that if we stop acting on it on a daily basis, it's going to happen again. The worst thing that I've heard ever is, and they get repeated all the time, we'll do this so it doesn't happen again. It will happen again. It will happen. Genocide will happen again. The problem is that to delay it requires daily activities of all of us in order for that to really not happen. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Mirsad. And yeah, I'll just say briefly too. Yeah, it should be as a Holocaust and genocide scholar and educator, very few terms upset me more than when I hear people piously intone "never again" or "nie wieder" in Germany. We have learned from the Holocaust. We're not going to allow this to happen again. And thanks also when, in fact, we, humanity, the so-called international community, have allowed genocides to occur many, many times since 1945. Thanks for pointing out too, and in a very humane and sensitive fashion, that without generating any kind of a competition for victimhood or diminishing the horrors being visited upon Ukraine, I've also been rather shocked and surprised, not completely shocked, unfortunately, to hear the Bosnian genocide just completely being forgotten as people talk about certain things being unprecedented since 1945 on the European continent and so on. And it should be known to all of our guests and friends out there that Eastern Bosnia, there are all these entire region and many towns and villages that were once 90 or 95% Bosniak, Bosnian Muslim, that are now, where now very few Muslims still exist, and that Serb politicians and spokespeople have gone beyond denial, which they've been rather successful in, to actually what some people refer to as triumphalism. That is, openly celebrating and reveling in their misdeeds and crimes, for example, by creating monuments to celebrate the genocide at Srebrenica and elsewhere. Clark, let me direct a couple questions to you. And I'm keeping an eye on the clock because within about 15 minutes, we're going to entertain some questions that have come in from chat and elsewhere. And yeah, Clark, if you could say a couple words about what motivated you to write this book about Mirsad's run for the presidency in 2018.
Well, I'd like to say it went back to like 2006 when I had my first job interview with him. And it's like I got done. I said, I'm going to write a book about this guy someday. That is not how it occurred. Anyways.
This would be even better than the Roman Empire beginning.
It's a long story. No, we won't. But what happened was we have become friends since he was the dean of the college and have remained that way. And I got wind that he was running for president in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but he hadn't told me yet. So I said, I don't know if I'm supposed to ask him if this is true or not. So I just kind of held back. And then the announcement came in January of 2018. And so we communicated somewhere in there. And I said, well, I knew he was going to be going back to Sarajevo at some point. I said, well, we need to do lunch. Well, the lunch never occurred. And then I was talking to someone else from the university later in May, and I said, yeah, I said, I still need to get together with Mirsad. And he says, well, you might want to think about doing that, because this was on a Thursday, and they said, well, he's leaving on Monday. And I said, oh, I guess so much for lunch. So anyways, I talked to him a little bit. He was very busy getting ready to get out of town, but that following Saturday, he said, yeah, give me a call. He's saying goodbye to his family, but said, just give me a call, because I said, I got a couple of things I think I want to run by you. And it was then that I just came up with this whole idea of, this is an incredible story, and it needed to be documented, and it needed to be shared. And so when I got on the phone with him, I can hear grandkids in the background, but the man has taken time to talk to me. And so I said, well, what do you think about doing a podcast? And we can start doing a podcast with this and go up to the election or whatever. And in his typical style, it was, go for it. I said, okay. And then I said, okay, here's the other idea. I said, I think we need to do a book. I want to write a book about this. And the first thing he says, well, only if I win. And then my response was, I'm the non-scientist here. Let me figure this out. You're the researcher. I'm telling you, it's like, this is going to, you don't have to win for this to be a story. And then he paused for a minute. He said, well, go for it. So that's the nuts and bolts of how we got to where we were going with this, and have continued the podcast since May of 2018, and we're still going with them. So it's he's good material. It wasn't too hard to put a book together to try to let people know what's going on. It's important. I mean, it's really important, because it's, people need to know about these things, and it's a movement. And I brag about him more than he brags about himself, but I mean, this, he does incredible work, and it's, people need to know, and maybe by knowing what's going on and understanding the situation, we can prevent some of the things that have happened in the past. So I hope I can contribute a little bit that way too.
Yeah, thanks, Clark. And also, yeah, I recall that you had the opportunity to spend a week or so in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the run up to the election, and you were there on election day. So could you say a couple things about what that experience was like?
Incredible. I mean, I was very fortunate to be able to go over there, and I'd never been before. And I mean, there's so many remembrances of going, and I remember that I'd been up all night, but that's nothing new to you. As he says, sleep's overrated. So I sucked it up. But anyways, the flight from Munich to Sarajevo, it was so gorgeous in the country, and seeing the mountains. And then I had no idea that Sarajevo, I'd read historically, but to be there and see the beauty of the country was wonderful. And it was like, every moment that you're there, it's like you're walking down history. You look around, and there's synagogues, there's mosques, there's Catholic churches. I mean, it's like, you know that there was a time when people really seemed to be getting along at one point in time, and to see how things have progressed, not progressed, but have come about. And that was remarkable in itself. And the people, I mean, it's like loving, kind people. The only time I got yelled at is when I sat in front of I was getting out of the rain in front of a merchant's store, a jewelry store, and he asked me to move because people couldn't see the jewelry in the window. That was the only time. But it's to be able to walk the city and see the beauty of it, see the history. And then I couldn't help, when I looked at the surrounding mountains, to know that there were Serb troops up there laying mortar shells in the city. It's heartbreaking to see what had happened. And then the day before the election and election day, to be able to walk the streets with Mirsad and Mirzeta, I'll never forget that opportunity. I mean, I spent the whole day with him, both days, just walking, and people coming up to him. And you could sense, it didn't happen, obviously, that he won the election, but you could sense something was going on, just walking, and the people that would come up to him. and wave at him and stop him and talk to him. I mean, and I remember the day before the election, now I'm getting long-winded, but this man shining shoes on the side of the street, and he looks up at Mirsad and he says, "You're going to run for president. You need to get a shoe shine." So Mirsad stops and gets his shoe shined with this guy. But that was just, those 2 days were incredible. I mean, just to be able to walk with them and see the people and sense that there was change. People were gravitating to this message. So I'm at a loss for words to explain it all, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, and Clark, kind of, related to that, and just like the obstacles that this new political movement faced. Could you say something about, well, this is something that you describe in your book, Odyssey for Democracy, but could you say a few words about basically the media blockade in Bosnia during the elections and the run-up to the elections, including the limiting of coverage of Mirsad's campaign and the unequal representation in publicly televised debates, and maybe something about some of the strategies that Mirsad's campaign used to counteract this problem.
And Mirsad can jump in here whenever he wants to too, because this is, my words were his words in terms of what was happening over there. But he learned quickly that the media, the main media over there was a blockade, and they weren't going to cover anything that was going on. And it's, as Mirsad told me one time, they own the media. They either literally own the media or they buy them off, so they'll do what they need them to do with this. And because the campaign was underfunded and they couldn't, do a lot of advertising and those types of things, they had to come up with some strategies to combat this, because the only time he could get on TV, it was basically when he had to pay to get on TV because of political obligations or those types of things by the stations. But I mean, it was the TV stations, the print stations, all those types of things, print media, where he couldn't get any exposure. Now, of course, if something bad would happen or something like that, they'd be all over it and jump on it, of course. But so being the scientist and the researcher, they went to social media. And as I learned from the process through Mirsad, is we all think of Twitter as being the ultimate in terms of getting out and communicating with people, but over there, that's not the case. Facebook is still alive and well. And I was fortunate through the podcast to see how they started this effort out with social media, with Facebook, and how it grew. And from the early part of the summer until I was over there, the amount of traction that they had gotten with the Facebook, and they started doing their town hall meetings, and they would do live feeds from the town hall meetings on Facebook. And it was cool to watch. I mean, I got to see a couple of them when I was there at the town hall meetings, and he had folks out in the audience and they just had their phones up and they were actually filming and doing everything live. And I can't remember what your goal was. It like 20,000 by election day, and you hit it the day before, because he had an opportunity. That was another very powerful moment when he addressed the nation a couple of days before the election, and his ability to finally get on national TV, and that created a bump. But we were talking, and it was like, wow, it's happening, and was making it, was going to go. And I wanted to add one other thing too. It's like, not only did I walk the streets with him, I got to stand in line with he and Mirsad at the polling station and walked up with him. It's one of the few times that I can't crack him up. I did once, but that day was not the day to try to make him laugh. But it was an incredible experience to see them in there casting their votes, and then to immediately sit down with them at a table and do another podcast with both he and Mirsad, record them. I'll never forget.
Yeah, well, Clark, that's a good segue to another question I wanted to ask you, which if you could tell us a couple more things about the two podcasts that you organized, which I think are quite impressive. One of them called Bosnia and Herzegovina, The Quest for Change, and the other one, Modern Genocide, Bosnia and Herzegovina, 1992-95. And I know there's one or two other projects like the Oral History Project, that you and I have been discussing, for some time, that you've launched. So anyway, yeah, tell us, a little bit about these projects.
Well, the podcast started, as I said, in May of 2018, and it became, we didn't know if we were going to continue on past the election in 2018, but sitting there with Mirzeta and Mirsad the day after the election and a couple of days after, seeing the momentum, how many votes he got, unprecedented. It's like, I think we need to keep telling this story. So we've done probably, we have, it's over 160 podcasts that we've done. And particularly during the election, I mean, we tried to do it because I was amazed, because I thought, well, if I could talk to him once a month leading up to the election, this would be good. Well, I ended up talking to him once a week, and rarely did we miss a week when we were doing the podcasts. And then when I was over there, we were doing one a day, maybe sometimes two a day, but it just continued. And it's like, we need to do this. And so it was obvious that a movement had been started, and we wanted to continue it and follow it continually to let, hopefully, people know that this is going on. It's like, it's important. And then the oral histories, and that came about primarily through Mirzeta, because I was actually interviewing her for a podcast and part of the book at the time. And this was right after Mirsad had gone over to Sarajevo. And we talked about it, and she had mentioned that she had been trying to get this project off the ground of talking to survivors of the genocide. Mirsad is here as well. I've spoken with him about his experiences. And I just felt, let me know what we need to do, and we'll try to make this happen and pull it off. And so it's been a gradual process. And then John and I got involved when I shared with him as well that this is something that really needs to be done, because these voices need to be preserved. I mean, particularly with the elders, it's like we need to get these stories documented and have them so people understand. Yeah, they're painful, but it's important for folks around the world to hear and understand those things. So we're continuing down that road in terms of trying to get more people to come forward, because it's not easy. Some will, and others, it's still too painful to talk about their experiences. Or in one instance, I spoke with a woman who really wanted to share her story, but she has family that still live in the Republic of Srpska. And as a result, even though we would not use her name or anything else, it would be audio, she feared for her family. So these are the types of things that we're going up against, but we're always looking and searching for people that will come forward and share these stories. And as I said, John and I are committed to trying to make this happen as well.
Hey, and Clark, I'm going to ask you one other question. I'll ask you to, answer just as briefly as you can. I'm impressed with both of y'all's concision, because now, because we're really down to about the last 10 minutes for a handful of questions, of some very good questions that have come in. But this event is organized by and at the Atkins Library, which published your book. So I wonder if you could just very quickly offer any advice for anyone interested in publishing with this, I think, really a great project that Atkins has launched of publishing ebooks with them.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what I learned. I got connected with Atkins via you, John. I don't remember. You couldn't attend some conference with someone that was here speaking from the University of Arkansas, and it was primarily geared towards faculty and getting published. And I just walked up to her afterwards and I said, I've been working on this story with Mirsad. Do you think it would be of interest? And she said, yes, she did. I spoke with her, and then I got reconnected with Atkins Library. And as they say, the rest is history, because they were very eager to do the story, and then got me connected with UNC Press. And I was very fortunate. It also, I'll give you credit. It all started with you not being able to go someplace.
That's why he asked the question.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I didn't give him enough accolades. Yeah, but no, it's It was just a matter of asking questions and saying, look, I'm not faculty, but hey, we got a project, and they said yes.
Okay, right on. Hey, I'm going to ask, we've got a number of good questions in. I'm going to read out a couple of them to y'all. This one seems to be, I think, directed to Mirsad. It's from someone whose name I recognize, a Bosnian American from, I think, from the town of Foča, who's been here in Charlotte for some time, and yeah, who I first met actually at a commemoration of Srebrenica. And anyway, yeah, his question is, how do you see the role of the EU or lack thereof in promoting true democratic reforms in Bosnia? Do you believe there are opportunities to change course in lieu of the current events related to the Ukraine war? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Well, Bosnians were really hoping, as unfortunate as events in Ukraine have been, they were hoping that European Union will change its tune. Because in Bosnia, they've been saying, why don't you talk and agree to what needs to be done? To people who don't want to do that. Ukraine was a different thing. Within 6 days, the EU and the United States decided to have sanctions against Russia, substantial sanctions, financial and otherwise, supplied weapons. Germany started even changing their constitution to allow them to be more involved militarily in the future. President Zelensky wrote down on a piece of paper, we would like to join EU. EU started thinking about it. We said, oh, we would like to do the same thing. Because if we don't, it's going to tear us apart. A month later, the same story. Bosnia-Herzegovina has to come up with fulfill 14 requirements, knowing that they will never be fulfilled because Serbs and Croats within Bosnia-Herzegovina don't want that to happen. More Serbs than the Croats. NATO, Serbs don't want it because that means that Russia is not going to be happy. Serbia does not want to join NATO, therefore Republika Srpska will not allow Bosnia-Herzegovina to join the NATO. At this point, EU, European Union, is applying different set of principles to Bosnia-Herzegovina. It is suggesting that even further erosion of human rights should be allowed by changing the way we elect people, by reducing even further who can vote for whom, who can be a candidate. So basically, Bosnia-Herzegovina does not trust at this point, even though we depend on European Union. We don't trust them that they will do the right thing. The right thing is that what's good for you, it's good for us. It's not that one thing for us, one for you. This is not a ghetto. It is part of Europe, has always been. Bosnia-Herzegovinians are and have been Europeans forever. United States, different story. Much more forceful, proactive, different relationship. Bosnian Herzegovinians trust the United States, not so sure with European Union. And we'll see that where that will go. The problem is now with the fact that it is a new world order that is being shaped. I can imagine that the situation would have been different had it happened 3 years ago when somebody else was heading the administration in the United States. Relationship with Putin and Russia would have changed the story and the response of the world. And so that also shows how one person can affect things. But now it's democracy at stake. It's the human rights at stake. The rights of the people are at stake right now, not just Bosnia-Herzegovina, not just in Ukraine. It's in Poland, in Hungary, Serbia, throughout the world. The autocratic forces are back in business. They're running the show. And in that scenario, human rights don't matter.
Yeah, Mirsad, there's another question that's come in, and I know that this is something of great concern to many Bosnians and Bosnian Americans. The way the question is phrased is, do you think there's hope for the youth in Bosnia? Many of them are migrating to other European nations. And also in terms of generational hate that occurs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, do you think it'll stop? And yeah, and I know that there are many young people going to Germany and other countries, and that this is a very worrying trend.
Bosnia and Herzegovina used to have 4.2 million people. It's a small country. Today, it probably has about 2.8. That's the population. Now, more people die than babies get born, plus the immigration. People leave. People don't leave because of jobs. There is enough job. They don't live poorly. But the hatred and conflict is present to such a great extent that young people don't, or anybody really don't want to do that anymore, and they decide to leave. So what has to happen is for the country to get back to become more just and more efficient. It's hard to imagine living in Bosnia and Herzegovina where the person who leads one of the leading parties, there are three leading parties, that person is more important than the party. The party is more important than its people. Its people are more important than the country. The country comes last. It's a mafia politics. Politicians rule the judicial system. They decide who gets hired anywhere. Your life doesn't matter. What you have, but your rights, you have no rights. So basically, when you go to vote, they know that they count on 70% of the population, 53% vote. 70% is spoken for because they give them the jobs. They must vote for them. In addition, you know who counts? The people in power. They staff the electoral committees and boards. They count the votes. It doesn't matter who votes. What matters is who counts. And therefore, what needs to happen is so many things. Electronic voting, or at least scanning, plus the two-term limits, plus the second round of voting. You cannot, people there win with 23% of the votes, become president with 23% of the votes. It's impossible. So 13% of the people voted for you, you become the president. It's the future of democracy in the world, I have to tell you, because you're seeing more and more of that replicated throughout the world. And it's the fight, big fight for the rights of the people, for the citizens, for democracy. And it's the best plan. I'm really saying it is the best laboratory on earth right now, because you have United States, you have European Union, you have China, you have Russia, you have democracy that hasn't established itself in 30 years. The constitution that has never been tried anywhere else, and people who went through hell to get to this point. And what I'm trying to do is to make politics cool again in such a place, honest and cool. Yeah.
That would be quite an accomplishment. I'll vote for you for president of this country too, if you do that. Hey, well, yeah, I think we're.
Can I just one little comment, because the comment of running again. The first time I was by myself, really, and no money, unknown person, and something happened that was called cool positive. Now there is a coalition. There is 4 or 5 parties who would like to get behind my candidacy, and I said I'm willing to do that, of course. But what I would rather see is that the opposition gets together and puts one person up there who will then fight the nationalists. And that's what I will vote for. I'm not official candidate because you have to announce the elections. Then there's a period when you can declare and file for it, and then when they clear you, then you're a candidate. Therefore, at this point, I'm one of the people who basically said I'm willing to do it, but there must be other better ways of doing it. Much better chances than before. There are other parties who would like to support it, but the better thing would be to create a national front of all of those who are for the rights of the citizens, fight the nationalists, and then have a one list against all of them. That's what I'm spending my time on, trying to get the opposition together, have a better person than me run in order to perhaps give a better feel of the future of the world.
Thank you. And Mirsad, I'm going to ask you, there's one final question I'm going to raise before inviting everyone to step next door, those of you on campus, to a reception. This came in from a former student of mine, and it's a little bit of a historical question, but it's also really is related to not only the past, but also the future, I think, of the region. We began this program an hour ago by acknowledging the 2 anniversaries of April 6th related to the Bosnian genocide and the Rwandan genocide. And in both of those cases, I remember very clearly hearing all sorts of nonsense from American politicians and European politicians and in the news media about ancient hatreds, ancient tribal hatreds, ancient Balkan hatreds, et cetera, as an explanation for everything, as an excuse for inaction. And so at any rate, the question that my former student raises is, was the genocide of Bosnians ethnically or religiously motivated, or perhaps both to a certain extent, or perhaps not exactly ethnic or religious in motivation?
Well, I can give you my opinion. I'm not a scholar, so I cannot really do that objectively. But in my mind, that's all the part of the land grab. So political elite would like to find a way to get a piece of another country that doesn't belong to them. And you have to have policy. You have to have policy, and the policy has always been in that part of the world. You kill a third of the people, you expel the third, and the other third, the remaining third, will somehow adjust and become whatever they need to become to survive. Those are the tools. There is no ancient hatred among the people. Absolutely not. There is desire of politicians to turn them into enemies by telling them stories that are most of the time not true. They control the media, they control everything. Therefore, to me, it is really not ethnic hatred. There is a belief that, or myth, that they are this tribe or this ethnic group, and perhaps we are chosen, or it doesn't matter. The point is, we didn't fight. We only fought against each other where some other force brought war to us. In this particular case, Serbia, Croatia, before that Germans, before that the Ottomans, before that Romans, and that's when we fought, because they were smart enough to say divide and conquer, and we fell for it every time. But in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we work with Bosniaks and Serbs and Croats, and I went to Belgrade to talk to Serbians, and I went to Zagreb to talk to Croatians. And there are people who want better everywhere, and our job is to find them. But it's definitely not ancient hatred. It's the myth that needs to be established so that the political elite can get what they want.
Yeah. Thank you, Mirsad. And for what it's worth, yeah, in my humble way, I definitely agree. I'm writing a chapter about the genocide, and there was one particular book called Balkan Ghost, which I thought was a rather silly book, but that exerted a lot of influence on people like Bill Clinton and others in the mid-1990s with its premise about so-called ancient hatreds and so on. It also just happens that Croatians, Serbs, and Bosnians simply speak different dialects of the same language, have much more in common than dividing them, and so on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think we're going to wrap it up, but we do have just a couple minutes for any final concluding remarks that either of the panelists would like to offer.
I just wanted to give a special thanks once again to Atkins Library for hosting this event today, putting it on. And they took the idea of the book, they embraced it, and they walked me through this whole process with this thing, getting me hooked up with UNC Press and the whole thing. And I can't thank them enough. Many people were involved. Most recently, I want a personal shout to Savannah Lake, who came on kind of partway through the process, but she's been incredible with her help to me and guidance, and has always been there to help with it. And I appreciate it very much.
And I would like to just to reiterate one more time how unique this opportunity is when I look at it in this point in time, or in history, or place. Going back to education, because it's so important, and the most important thing for Bosnia and Herzegovina to get the educational system right, so people will know better. But to have a class embedded within the campaign to learn this style of politics, democracy, or lack of it, in the changing world, and possibility of changing it, learning it by doing, or doing research within it. And I don't know when another situation or in life in the past where somebody decided to go do something, change in a country like Bosnia and Herzegovina, that's by itself, it's a laboratory, social science laboratory, where somebody, it touches everything from sociology to political science and policy and data science. Again, I'm repeating, and computer science, whatever you touch, and social media, and the fake news, and the criminal politics or mafia politics, everything in the same place. Educational opportunity, research opportunity, unique. To know that it's going to happen anytime soon. So I would like to figure out how we can make sure so that UNC Charlotte students or faculty or researchers benefit from it. But thank you for doing a marvelous job, even though you let him call me material, but that's fine.
Hey, well, yeah, thanks very much, Mirsad and Clark, for all your work, as well as for this event. And thanks very much to the folks at Atkins, Savannah, and others. And for, I'm here on Zoom. I can't see who all is there in the library, but if you don't know about our very, very strong and numerous Bosnian and Bosnian American community, then I invite you to go down to Central Avenue to the Euro Grill, I believe it's called, the Bosnian restaurant and market on Central and Plaza Midwood. The Bosnian Mosque over in East Charlotte is a wonderful place where I've had the honor of partaking of the iftar, the breaking of the fast ceremony a few times. I've always felt guilty because my Bosnian friends are so generous. They invite me to be first in line, even though I've only been fasting for a half hour, you know, while my Bosniak friends have been fasting for 14 or 15 hours. But anyway, our city has been really enhanced and enlivened by the presence of a very large Bosnian American community. Just lastly, in absentia from my home on Zoom, I invite those of you who are physically present there at the library to step next door to the Halton Room. There are some light refreshments, and pick up a copy of a book, and there's a book signing that will be taking place for Clark's excellent book about Mirsad's campaign. Thank you very much, everybody.